The wealth gap in America is insane, so let's talk about it. This is a pie chart of all the wealth in America, and there's a few key aspects of this to really look at. The top 1% owns 43% of all American wealth. Yes, 43%. 1% owns 43%, with the next 4% owning 29%. Meanwhile, the bottom 80% of Americans only own 7% of the entire American wealth. Does this seem fair to you? No? Well, let's show you some more graphics to really show you how fucked our system is. In 2018, one study found that the top 400 wealthy families were, for the first time in history, actually paying a lower tax rate than the bottom 50% of families. How is that possible? Not only that, but the top 1% now own more wealth than the entire middle class. Dear Lord, compare that to 1993, when the top 1% owned about 16% of total American wealth, while the middle class owned about 37%. Yet, here we are. This video does a really great job of visualizing just how skewed our wealth distribution is. Americans were asked what they think our wealth distribution should be versus what they think it is. Then, it's revealed what our wealth distribution actually is. And the results are quite shocking.
And here is the actual distribution. Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have.
Our ideal wealth distribution is so far removed from what the reality actually is. And that's scary considering both Democrats and Republicans alike picked this ideal version. Another good way to analyze our wealth inequality is to compare it against other wealthy nations. Among G7 countries like Italy, Japan, Germany, Canada, France, and the UK, we have the highest level of income inequality. If that isn't enough for you, let's take a look at this other graphic. I'm sorry I'm hitting you with all these graphics, I just think visuals are the best way to actually show you. If that isn't enough, let's take a look at this graphic, which has us all the way down here at the bottom. We have the third highest average wealth, yet we're not even in the top 10 for median wealth. So what does this tell us? Well, we know that outliers can skew average or mean numbers. And for America, these outliers come from billionaires who own more wealth than most of America combined. Names like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, Buffett, and Ballmer are all names we've come to know, and they raise our average quite a bit. And all of this doesn't even consider the wealth gap amongst races, with white Americans soaring high above black and Hispanic Americans. Bernie Sanders is a notable figure that has championed a more fair system that doesn't let an oligarchy control America. The problem is, he's a rare breed of politician. Party lines and most issues discussed in our country are just distractions to keep the wealthy in power and continue to control everything. From billionaires like Elon Musk working with Trump to maintain his interests.
He told Republicans that if they voted for this proposal, which they had already agreed to do, he would take out his wallet and spend as much money as it took to defeat them in primaries and drive them out of office.
To Nancy Pelosi and other Congress members making millions of dollars because of their insider information on how laws will impact the markets. I mean, there's even a Twitter page called Nancy Pelosi Stock Tracker, and I think that's awesome. These people are benefiting in ways that they should not be allowed to. So how does the wealth gap actually affect us? Well, if wealth was more properly distributed, perhaps huge corporations in, say, healthcare wouldn't bleed people dry, and instead would be able to properly tend to the sick. Perhaps public schools wouldn't have to worry about budget cuts that destroy educational settings in the arts. The list could go on, but the key aspect is that the rich have an absolutely absurd amount of control over America. For example, Citizens United allows for an unprecedented amount of money to be able to funnel into campaigns for politics.
The wealthiest person in the world, who spent at least $277 million to elect Donald Trump in a Republican Congress, has now claimed complete ownership of that party.
Millions of dollars are pumped into candidates who will support the corporations, rather than their constituents the politician is actually meant to serve. By allowing the ultra-wealthy and corporations to contribute so much money, American politicians worry about making their donors happy because they help their political career. I mean, Elon Musk even promised to opponents that if they didn't vote alongside his wishes, that he would basically crush their political careers. So that's kind of where we're at. It's a sad situation, and it just goes to show how corruption has remained legal because of this workaround. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we need to have a perfectly equal wealth distribution, because if we did, we'd likely see a decrease in production and innovation. But a more balanced wealth distribution would see an improvement in standard of living, reduced poverty, and potentially even economic growth. The wealth gap should not be a party issue. It should be a working and middle class issue, with Americans fighting for what makes rational sense. I'm not encouraging an end to capitalism or anything like that, but if you don't think that billionaires shouldn't be able to make such an ungodly amount of money while millions of people struggle, then I don't know what to say. Now here comes the problem, right? And the problem with saying just tax the rich is that it's quite hard to do so. This is because a lot of their money is actually in appreciating assets, which again is quite difficult to tax. Plus, if you did tax them a ridiculous amount, then maybe they'd take their business elsewhere. Also, we'd have to trust that our tax dollars actually go towards programs and services that benefit us. So I don't have all the answers, and I'm not an economist. All I know is that the wealth inequality in our country is nuts, and something has to be done. Unfortunately for us, the ultra-rich are the rulers and control society. So good luck.